The forbidden line. Do you think the United States and Canada have always been just friends? That the 5,525-mile border between them is only a symbol of peace and friendship? Imagine if I told you that behind this border there was a top-secret plan designed to eliminate Canada completely. A plan that, if it had ever been carried out, would mean that today we might be looking at one single superpower controlling the entire continent. This is the story of War Plan Red, a secret plan created by the United States Army in the 1920s and 1930s for one clear reason: if a war ever broke out between America and Britain, capturing Canada would be necessary. The plan covered everything: troop movements, bombing targets, supply routes, and even the use of chemical weapons, and all of it was written inside an official document marked top secret. At that time, Canada was a British dominion, and for American war planners, it was a weak point, a place Britain could use to attack the United States. The real goal of War Plan Red was not just to defeat Canada, but to remove it from the map and turn it into a new American state. Cities like Halifax, Montreal, Toronto, Winnipeg, and Vancouver were not just cities, they were primary invasion targets. Halifax even had plans that included the use of poison gas. Despite international rules, Montreal and Toronto were marked for air attacks, while Winnipeg and Vancouver faced plans involving tanks and naval blockades. And this was not just theory on paper. In 1935, the U.S. Congress approved funding for new air bases, presented to the public as job programs that built in strategic locations ideal for striking Canada. However, America was not the only one planning. Canada was aware of the danger. Prime Minister Mackenzie King and Intelligence Chief James Buster Sutherland Brown created Defense Scheme No. 1, a bold plan where Canada would strike first, cross into the United States, create chaos, and buy time for British naval support. Imagine a Canadian general driving a Ford Model T through New York and Vermont, quietly studying roads, bridges, and supply lines, planning how to destroy them if war came. This was not paranoia, it was survival planning. All of this happened during the political and economic tension of the 1920s and 1930s, fueled by trade wars, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, and economic collapse. The most frightening part is that these plans were ready while the public knew nothing. One misunderstanding, or one political decision could have completely changed the map of North America. And in Chapter 2, we will see how close the United States actually came to invading Canada. Chapter 2. When the plan became real. Think about this: when a war plan stays locked inside a file, it is just an idea. But when money is approved, bases are built, and generals start pointing at maps in closed rooms, that plan becomes real. This is exactly what happened with War Plan Red. By the early 1930s, American military leaders had reached a dangerous conclusion: if a war ever broke out with Britain, Canada had to be taken down immediately, because any delay would be a disaster. Speed was everything. The strategy was simple and brutal: hit Canada from multiple directions at the same time, break coordination between provinces, and end resistance before help could arrive. Halifax was the first and most critical target because it was Britain's main gateway into North America, and one of the few ports that did not freeze in winter. The U.S. Navy planned heavy bombardment from the sea, followed by large troop landings, and the documents even stated that if resistance was strong, chemical weapons could be used, meaning civilians were not considered safe. Next was Montreal, the financial and transportation heart of Canada, where controlling bridges and rail lines would split the country in half, and American planners believed it could fall within just 3 days. Toronto was marked not only for ground invasion, but also for air attacks, with factories, rail yards, and power stations clearly identified to break morale by cutting electricity and production. On the prairies, there were no natural defenses, so mechanized forces from North Dakota were planned to move quickly toward Winnipeg, a key rail hub connecting east and west. On the west coast, Vancouver faced a naval blockade designed to cut supplies and stop British reinforcements from Asia. But Canada is not standing still. Canadian leaders knew direct defense would fail, so Defense Scheme No. 1 focused on striking first inside the United States, not to conquer, but to destroy bridges, rail lines, and supply depots to delay American mobilization. General Buster Brown even traveled across the border in civilian clothes, studying American roads, bridges, and water supplies. This was not fiction or exaggeration. It was real fear, real preparation, and real tension during a time of trade wars, political anger, and economic collapse, when one wrong move could have set the entire continent on fire. Chapter 3. The War That Never Happened. Imagine it is June 1935. Tensions are high. Trade disputes are growing. Newspapers are full of angry headlines. And the global economy is close to collapse. War Plan Red is fully prepared. Troops are ready. Bombers are waiting on airfields. And naval fleets are moving into position. Everything is set, waiting for one single order. If that order had been given, the map of North America would have changed forever. But history often turns on small moments. Britain and the United States slowly began to focus on a bigger and more dangerous threat rising elsewhere in the world. Germany in Europe and Japan in the Pacific were becoming serious problems, and leaders on both sides realized that fighting each other would only weaken them. Strategic thinking finally stopped the countdown. For Canada, this meant survival. Defense Scheme No. 1 was never activated, and the secret preparations made by Buster Brown and his team remained unused. But the danger had been very real. Cities like Halifax, Montreal, Toronto, Winnipeg, and Vancouver stayed safe not because war was impossible, but because circumstances changed at the last moment. The lesson is clear. Nations do not act on friendship alone. They act on interests. War Plan Red was not just a document. It was proof of how fragile peace can be when fear and ambition take over. Today, the United States and Canada share open borders, trade, and culture. But if the events of the 1930s had gone slightly differently, that reality might not exist. The peaceful line between these two countries hides a forgotten truth, a secret plan that came close to rewriting history, stopped only by timing, shared threats, and a narrow escape from disaster. And now see you in the next video. Goodbye.